Hello and welcome to English 12A Quarter 2. Sorry that I couldn't be with you for the first day of class, but I wanted to make sure that I recorded the first lesson for you so that you weren't missing anything and we could stay on track. So, hopefully you are already signed up with Google Classroom. That would be the main way that you are viewing this video right now. So, what we're going to do today is cover the first part that's will be posted in the pace or should be posted in the pacing guide by the time you see this video. We're going to cover the history of the English language tutorial and the Beowulf tutorial. And then next week we'll go over Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales. All right, so just a little bit of an overview of how the class is going to go. I am not going to go over the tutorial very much with you. There might be times when it's important to go back and look at things in the tutorial, but you're capable of going through tutorials on your own. You can also even have them spoken aloud to you if you'd like that. What I'm going to be doing is going over the lesson activities and then some of the information that I think it's important for you to know and for us to get a little bit of a deeper look at. So, the very first tutorial has 3 lesson activities, so we're going to go over all of them. This particular one links us to different articles, and then what we're going to do first is just go through what this whole lesson activity is asking us to do. So a big part of this is, this is about increasing your vocabulary. So it's about what to do when you encounter words that you don't know. That happens a lot. The best way to learn words, though, is to read. So the first one that we're going to talk about is context clues. We're going to do a couple of, there's a couple of exercises about context clues. I am not going to do all of them for you. The second one is about connotation and denotation. Again, you're just going to answer some questions, and then we're going to talk about word origins. So like, what countries do words come from? How did English develop? All of that. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is context clues. Okay. So this kind of talks about like different ways that we deal with unfamiliar words. We don't really need to talk about all of those because we're going to talk about context clues. So what that means is that you're trying to determine the meaning of a word based on the context in which it occurs, meaning like what the other words around it are, kind of what the situation is. So when you read an unknown word, study the words that surround it, look for clues that might reveal the meaning. This allows you to figure out without stopping to look up the word. Excuse me, sorry, recovering. Okay. So there was a few different ways to use context clues or things that give you the context to figure out the answer. One is a synonym or comparison being a part of it. Another is, I don't know why that happened. The next is sometimes it gets directly defined for you. Then you can also be given an example. Things that can contrast, so show two opposites. And then there's another one that gives you the experience, so it might use some of your senses. And then if none of those appear to be in use, you can try to replace the word with a blank and then try and think of like words that would fit it. And then that would probably help you get at least a synonym out of it to kind of understand what that word means. And so this gives you examples. Again, if you want to know more about this article is linked right in this lesson activity. So you can just go and look at it yourself. All right, so we'll talk about the first one, right? So what the question is for I think it's part ABC. You're going to read through and then find the meaning of the underlying words using context clues. Explain your answer in each case. So the noxious fumes of ammonia and bleach filled her nostrils and overwhelmed her. She hit the ground with a loud thwack. So this is kind of an experience one. We're getting this idea, okay, there's a smell, like some sort of smell is overwhelming, and then she hits the ground, so she's fainting. So we can get the idea that noxious means like toxic, really bad, like that kind of idea. And so you're just going to explain how you got there. It would be great if you included the strategy too, but you don't have to. So that's what you're going to do for part A, B, C, and D. Okay, and then for question 2, we're going to talk about connotation and denotation. So connotation is basically, denotation is the dictionary definition of a word. So it is what the word means, and that's it. Like that's just it. Like that's the definition of the word. The connotation, though, is what we assign to the word. So we give words feeling. We attach emotion and expectations to certain words. So, like, there's a difference between calling someone like, let me think of a good one. Well, the one that I often use is like homeless person versus bum. You get a different kind of idea in your head when one is said versus the other. Bum kind of has what we would say is a negative connotation, whereas homeless person is just the denoted word. It's the definition, like a person without a home, right? So connotation, we attach negativity or positivity to. So like this example here, home. People will say like, oh, it's a house, but it's not a home. So like the house would have more of a negative connotation in that sense, and home has a positive connotation. We associate home as a positive thing. Miserly and thrifty. So miserly is like somebody who pinches every penny and keeps all their money, and then thrifty is somebody who's just good at saving money. So you get that idea. That's what's going on here. So if we go back, you're given 2 words for A through D, and you're going to write which is the positive connotation, which is the negative connotation, and then a sentence explaining it. So for part A, smelly versus fragrant. Smelly has a negative connotation. Fragrant has a positive connotation. Why? Smelly implies something with a smell, like ugh, stinky. But fragrant, we associate that with words or things like flowers or perfumes. So that's what you need to do for explanation. Okay. Question 3, word origins knowledge article. Whew, there's a lot of words there. Okay. This one is a good one to definitely like use while you're going through. But hopefully in the past you've learned about roots and affixes, prefixes and suffixes or affixes, and you've kind of gotten some information about that. And you've seen something like this before that's like, this is the root, this is what it means, here's it used in a word. I guess we're not getting the country of origin listed in here. I thought that was what the assignment was. Okay, sorry. Okay, you're just going to identify the root and affixes after you define the word. So in this case, we have pandemic. So one of my favorite tricks, because I hate looking for stuff forever, is if you're using a Chromebook or any sort of not Apple computer, if you hold down the Control key on your keyboard and then hit the F key, a little window will pop up. If you happen to be using a Mac, it's the Command F. So I'm going to look up pan, And look, I found it. Okay, so it means all. So I've got that, and then let's see. I think we should get another. No. Let's get it. Here we go. Relating to all. Okay, so pandemics, and then dem, I don't know why it's not in here, is people. So pandemic, relating to all people. A flu pandemic means like tons and tons and tons of people got it. So that's what you're doing, is you're finding that out. So if you look, you'll see pandemic, an extremely widespread outbreak of disease. You can go and look these words up and get the actual definition. There's a website, it's called dictionary.com, and it's a dictionary on the internet. And then it shows you right here, you identify its root and affixes. You don't even have to define them. I was doing too much. So you just have to look at how to break up the word to get that. And that's what you're doing for A, B, C, and D. Cool. Don't copy the same answers. I know it's easy, but like just get a different definition. Cool. We're not done with this tutorial. Okay, so that covers lesson activity 1. Too far. I did not make any notes for myself on this one. All right. So, yes, reading. So, not using. Okay. So, what are we doing? In this activity, we're going to read selections from Beattie's An Ecclesiastical History of the English People and answer questions based on the selections. So first, we're going to read Julius Caesar, the first Roman that came into Britain, from Book 1, Chapter 2, and answer the questions below. Is this the same? It is. Okay. Okay. So we're going to be looking for the overall tone of the passage, how Caesar is described, how the battles in the story are portrayed, what does the excerpt imply about Rome's relationship with France. All right, so we're going to go ahead and read this first passage here. Britain had never been visited by the Romans, and was, indeed, entirely unknown to them before the time of Caius Julius Caesar, who, in the year 693, after the building of Rome, but the 60th year before the incarnation of our Lord, was consul with Lucius Bibulus, and afterwards, while he made war upon the Germans and the Gauls, which were divided only by the river Rhine, came into the province of the Moroni, from whence is the nearest and shortest passage into Britain. I'd like to point out that that is one entire sentence. Okay, so one thing to know real fast, that I cannot remember comes up in is Gaul. That's what France used to be known as. So we'll get that out there. Okay. Here, having provided about 80 ships of burden and vessels with oars, he sailed over into Britain. We're talking about Caesar here, where, being first roughly handled in a battle and then meeting with a violent storm, he lost a considerable part of his fleet, no small number of soldiers, and almost all his horses. Returning into Gaul, France, he put his legions into winter quarters and gave orders for building 600 sail of both sorts. With these, he again passed over early in spring into Britain, but whilst he was marching with a large army toward the enemy, the ships riding at anchor were, by a tempest, which is like a really big storm, either dashed one against another or driven upon the sands and wrecked. 40 of them perished, the rest were, with much difficulty, repaired. Caesar's cavalry was, at the first charge, defeated by the Britons, and Labienus and the tribune slain. In the second engagement, he, with great hazard to his men, put the Britons to flight. to flight. Looking for my glasses now. Thence he proceeded to the river Thames, where an immense multitude of the enemy had posted themselves on the farthest side of the river under the command of Cassibelan, and fenced the bank of the river and almost all the ford under water with sharp stakes. The remains of these are to be seen to this day, apparently about the thickness of a man's thigh, and being cased with lead, remain fixed immovably in the bottom of the river. This being perceived and avoided by the Romans, the barbarians, not able to stand the shock of the legions, hid themselves in the woods, whence they grievously galled the Romans with repeated sallies. In the meantime, the strong city of Trinovantum, with its commander Androgus, surrendered to Caesar, giving him 40 hostages. Many other cities, following their example, made a treaty with the Romans. By their assistance, Caesar at length, with much difficulty, took Cassibelan's town, situated between two marshes, fortified by the ancient woods, and plentifully furnished with all necessaries. After this, Caesar returned to Gaul, but he had no sooner put his legions into winter corners than he was suddenly beset and distracted with wars and tumults raised against him on every side. Okay. So let's see. The tone of the passage is informative. I don't really think that it's doing much other than being informative. Um, let's see. The description of Caesar is that he is a persistent warrior, right? Like he keeps failing, he keeps getting defeated, and then he just comes back. So he does not give up. Uh, sorry, excuse me. The battles are described kind of briefly, but mostly in a sense that you're really getting that Caesar loses them. They do not go well for him. He just continues to have trouble over and over, being defeated by his enemies. And then the relationship of Rome and France, this is really it. The barbarians. So the French considered the Romans barbarians. Yeah, that's. Oh wait, am I wrong? I might be wrong. This might be referring to the French being the barbarians. So anyway, it doesn't really matter. The main thing is that the Romans want to conquer France because they're just trying to build their empire. So that is what that's all about. So the battles in the story they're portrayed briefly, and they talk about Caesar's repeated losses. Yeah, the Rome's relationship with France. Rome is trying to conquer France. Okay. The next one, the Hymn of Catamon, from Book 4, Chapter 14, and answer the questions below. So, who is Caedmon, and how does the excerpt describe him? Who might his story be seen as a moral? How moral is it a moral teaching rather than historic? The answer to that one. What might the significance of Caedmon being a simple cowherd be? Okay. So keep in mind that religion, right, something that you learned about in the tutorial, was just like part of everyday life, and people believed that magic existed and that miracles happened to people, and that's just the way that it was. So if this is supposed to be a history, right, and then like knowing that there are these elements of religious miracle and mysticism and whatever coming up in it, just keep that in mind. That might help with the moral versus history part. Okay. Oh, this says it's chapter 24. There was in this abscesses monastery a certain brother, particularly remarkable for the grace of God, who was wont to make pious and religious verses, so that whatever was interpreted to him out of Scripture, he soon after put into the same into poetical expressions of much sweetness and humility in English, which was his native language. Um, so, gosh, I just don't really want to read the whole. Uh, because you can read it yourself, but we got to get the answer. So, oh, okay. By his verses, the minds of many were often excited to despise the world and aspire to heaven. So people would rather like they want to do whatever they have to do to get to heaven. Others after him attempted in the English nation to compose religious poems, but none could ever compare with him, for he did not learn the art of poetry from men, but from God, for which reason he never could compose any trivial or vain poem, but only those which relate to religion, suited his religious tongue. Okay, we don't need to read the rest of it. This is just a continuing description. Okay. Having done so at a certain time and gone out of the house where the entertainment was to the stable where he had to take care of the horses that night, that he there composed himself to rest at the proper time. A person appeared to him in his sleep and saluting him by his name said, Caedmon, sing some songs to me. He answered, I cannot sing, for that is the reason why I left the entertainment and retired to this place, because I could not sing. The other who talked to him replied, However, you shall sing. What shall I sing? Rejoined he. Sing the beginning of created being, said the other. Hereupon he presently began to sing verses to the praise of God, which he had never heard, the purport whereof the was thus. We are now to praise the Maker of the heavenly kingdom, the power of the Creator and his counsel, the deeds of the Father of glory, how he, being the eternal God, became the author of all miracles, who first, as almighty preserver of the human race, created heaven for the sons of men as the roof of the house, and the next earth. This is the sense, but not the words, in order as he sang them in his sleep. For verses, though never so well composed, cannot be literally translated out of one language into another without losing much of their beauty and loftiness. Awaking from his sleep, he remembered all that he had sung in his dream, and soon added much more the same effect in verse worthy of the deity. So Caedmon is a farm herder and poet. Okay, so that's who he is. Let's see. And how does the excerpt describe me? So he's very pious. So pious is somebody who who is super religious. Like really the only thing that they like super care about is their like religion and making sure that everything they're doing is in glory of God. And so again, obviously stuff like this doesn't happen. Like he's not gonna just see someone appear in his dream and be able to sing songs and all of that. And so also the fact that this is just like about some person, kind of weird that this is like the thing, but we're going to skip ahead. Okay. For when the time of his departure drew near, he labored for the space of 14 days under a bodily infirmity which seemed to prepare the way, yet so moderate that he could talk and walk the whole time. That just means he got sick. Um, in his neighborhood was the house to which those that were sick and like shortly to die were carried. He desired the person that attended him in the evening, as the night came in which he was to depart this life, to make ready a place for him there to take his rest. This person, wondering why he should desire it, because there was as yet no sign of his dying soon, did what he had ordered. He accordingly went there, and conversing pleasantly in a joyful manner with the rest that were in the house before, when it was past midnight, he asked them whether they had the Eucharist there. They answered, What need of the Eucharist? For you are not likely to die, since you talk so merrily with us, as if you were in perfect health. However, said he, Bring me the Eucharist. Having received the same into his hand, he asked whether they were all in charity with him, and without any enmity or rancor. They answered that they were all in perfect charity and free from anger, and in their turn asked him whether he was in the same minds toward them. He answered, I am in charity, my children, with all the servants of God. Then strengthening himself with the heavenly viaticum, he prepared for the entrance into another life and asked how near the time was when the brothers were to be awakened to sing the nocturnal praises of our Lord. They answered, it is not far off. Then he said, well, let us wait that hour. And signing himself with the sign of the cross, he laid his head on the pillow and falling into his slumber, ended his life so in silence. Um, so it's just sort of like a moral story because we're really talking about like how important it is to be pious. And then it's important that he is a simple cowherd because it's relatable to people. These stories weren't really written for like royalty or anybody like major. They're written for the common folk. So it would be relatable to people. They could see themselves in him and they would want to be more like aka more religious. All right. Finally, this isn't what I wanted. Okay. It's more or less also not what I wanted. Okay. Here we go. I found it. Okay. In this activity, you'll read a sentence from the Old Testament's Ecclesiastes. You will also read George Orwell's revision of the sentence, which he designed to illustrate bad habits he found in the written work of his time. Carefully compare the two versions of the sentence. Describe what Orwell changed in terms of word choice and sentence structure, as well as tone and implied purpose or audience. Before you formulate your choice in paragraph form, you might want to take notes, comparing the two versions of the sentence in terms of word choice, sentence structure, tone, and implied audience and purpose. Okay, so sentence from Ecclesiastes. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happeneth. Orwell's reversion in Modern English of the worst sort. Objective consideration of contemporary phenomena compels the conclusion that success or failure in competitive activities exhibits no tendency to be commensurate with innate capacity, but that a considerable element of the unpredictable must invariably be taken into account. All right. So you need to write in a paragraph about what some of the differences between these two are. So I'll give you a couple. So the first one is like really simple words, right? The second one is like, did you just like throw a bunch of words into a hat and pick them out? Like, what is even happening there? Lots of big vocabulary words. So one is clearly meant for, like, if we're talking about the audience, one is clearly meant for the common people, and Orwell's revision is meant for the well-educated other people that are like really into English. The original is using the first person I. The other one, it's third person, I guess. There's not really like any sort of narrative context there. The revision is just wild. The original only uses nouns, adjectives, and verbs. The revision has like a lot of adjectives with their nouns. I'm sorry, in the first one, they're all used alone. Like we're not getting a lot of descriptive language, and we are in the other one. And then definitely the audience and then the purpose. So the purpose is that people would understand, that time and chance like give things to people. It's just like, good things will happen, bad things will happen. That's just what it is. But like the other one is big flowery language. All right, so that covers the history of the English language tutorial.